Kids, what do we love the most in ChessKid land? No, besides donuts. We love gambits, and today let's take a look at a new one that I don't think I've ever covered or ever even played on my live shows, the Evans Gambit. Now you're probably going to get in this position a lot as white. I've already talked about the move d4, my favorite gambit, the Scotch Gambit, but there is nothing wrong with bishop c4. This is the Italian game, and if black plays bishop c5, which is the most common move, you could be a nice, normal, everyday chess kid and play c3 with the idea of d4. You'd be in good company. That's what most people play. But if you like gambits as much as donuts, you might want to learn the Evans Gambit. Why are we putting a pawn where it can be captured two different ways? Well, funny you should ask, even though you didn't ask, I'm guessing you asked, because the next 5 minutes of your life, we're going to discuss it. Now, first thing is first. If you take with the knight, that makes almost no sense to me because white has two pleasant options. White can either get the pawn back right away with an immediate double attack on the weak spot, or white could play c3, and when you move the knight back, white could play the move d4 and actually transpose into something that we're going to talk about anyway. So 99% of all players here will take. Now, if black doesn't take, it's not really a gambit. You can just play a chess game. So if black moves the bishop, well, you could just use the open spot to develop your bishop and, play a chess game. Play b5 later, kick the knight, try to win the pawn, and you're not even down a pawn. So the most critical line, the one that we're going to talk about today, is when they accept the gambit. And in this position, I want you to play the move c3. Now this bishop has three different places to go. It can go here, it can go here, or it can go all the way back to the square e7. And I like to cut down on the amount of study material. Who likes to study? Not me. So I have a little bit of a trick. No matter which bishop move is played, you're going to play the same response as white. Isn't life easy? So if the bishop comes to c5, it is probably not a surprise to anybody, but we're going to play d4, and we have control of the center. In fact, this is always the position that makes the most sense to me because after takes and takes, white enjoys the snowplow. White has control of the center, and these pawns are going to bug those black knights later in the game. So we're not going to discuss bishop to c5 too much. By the way, if the knight had captured and you like to play the move c3 and d4, notice it's a transposition. Okay, let's go to the more critical option. After bishop takes, c3, the bishop might go back this way. Now there's a point of this move. Even though the bishop is biting on rock, it's also pinning the c-pawn in case you play d4. But remember I told you we're going to cut down on the amount of material to memorize? In this position, I want you to play d4 anyway, just like if the bishop had come to c5. Now black usually takes. Obviously we can't take back, that's against the rules because the pawn is pinned. So we're going to castle. And if black takes again, for the moment, we are down 3 pawns. However, we get tremendous development in a lightning quick attack. The best move here is probably queen to b3. Hello. And the queen and the bishop double team on the f7 pawn. Now you might wonder, why would the queen not go in front of the bishop? And that's because when black defends this pawn with the queen, then black can kick your queen later with a move like knight to e7. So the queen's actually going to go behind the bishop. And then when black defends the pawn, let's say black puts the queen on this square, we can immediately kick that queen with the move e5, and black better not take. Because if black does take, black is opening the e-file, and after a move like rook to e1, black is in big trouble. I know we're down 4 pawns, so black is not going to make it out of the opening. And even if the queen just slides away, we can calmly take this pawn. Bishop a3 is an idea, so black cannot castle, and our knight might keep hopping in and go after that queen, and surprisingly, in a lot of games, this queen completely runs out of squares. So this takes a little bit of practice, but I think that white's huge development lead is worth the couple pawns that he's down. Remember though, in a position like this, in a gambit, when you're down a couple of pawns, you must attack really quickly before black gets a chance to organize his king's safety and finish his development. We're going to go back and look at one more line today, and that would be if the bishop goes back to the square e7. And in fact, this is the retreat that Vishy Anand used when someone played the Evans Gambit against him. But it wasn't just anybody, it was Garry Kasparov, one of the best players of all time, some say the best. And they actually played this at the Tal Memorial. Tal was known for aggressiveness, so maybe Garry was kind of paying homage to Senor Tal by playing the Evans Gambit. Okay, so Kasparov Anand, how did it continue? Well, you got to go after the center. Remember I told you you're going to play c3 and d4 against any bishop move? Well, Gary took my advice, even though I was only about 13 when this game was played. Thanks, Gary. Okay, so in this position, black played the move knight to a5. If black attempts to defend the pawn with pawn to d6, then suddenly queen b3, exact same idea as before, and it is not that easy to defend this pawn. In fact, if you can find a way, congratulations, you're a better player than I am. Knight h6 is no good because bishop takes knight. The best move actually is knight to a5, allowing the pawn to get captured. We're not going to go down that road though, because white gets the pawn back and black won't be able to castle, and I think white should score pretty well in that position. So instead, let's look at what Vishy played. He played knight to a5. Now the bishop saved itself. Now the pawn, of course, is under tremendous pressure, so Vishy took. And then, this is kind of surprising, but most strong players here take with the queen. Gary is not the only player rated above 2,700 who had this position, and both of those strong super GMs took with the queen. So I'm going to take that as the best move. Now this pawn is in danger, and no matter what black puts on f6, white's just going to play the move e5 and kick it out of the way. So in this particular game, Vishy played knight f6, but Gary played e5, just like I said. Now this knight's got to be careful, because if the knight goes to the edge, we know knight on the rim is dim, and g4 would actually trap the knight. So this is one of those times where you do have to answer an attack with an attack. So black played the move knight to c6 to attack the queen, and the queen ran away, but at least Vishy got a new square for the knight to discover attack on the queen, and the queen came to g3. Now white is down a pawn, but white is pretty much never letting black castle easily. And you might say, Master Mike, black can castle here. Well, yeah, I get it. But if black does castle, this is a trick that a lot of chess kids know. Bishop to h6, and because of the checkmate threat, black virtually has to push the pawn, and black would lose the exchange. Now, I'm going to tell you an even more advanced idea. Black might actually be okay despite being down the exchange, but you are down the exchange against, a 2800. That's a tough spot to put yourself in. So if we go back to this position, Vishy decided to play the move g6. White castled, another position where black could castle, but if black castles, this bishop's getting to h6, this pawn is running from h4 to h5, it's still not that clear if the black king is safe. So Vishy remaneuvered his knight, but then c4, making this knight not be able to get back to the center of the board. Okay, so black tried to move d6 to finish some development, but then rook to d1, pinning this pawn, pawn c5 becomes an idea. The knight ran back to d7. Now that breaks the pin. That seems to make Gary decide what he wants to do about this pawn, but actually, Gary ignores the pawn. I think Vishy is hoping for a move like pawn takes pawn, because then after bishop takes, black wins a tempo, black's queen can come out, and I think black is, starting to get control of e5 and do okay. But if we go back to this position, remember, if you're going to be a gambit player, you got to play aggressively. So Gary plays a move bishop to h6. This is another surprising position where black maybe should take this pawn. Now, black actually did take the pawn, but after takes and takes, Gary did not go for material. This looks like it wins material, and it does, because we're forking the rook and the knight. Notice that pawn is pinned. But Gary would face this move bishop to f6, and then surprisingly, even though white has won the exchange, if we count the pawns, black has 2 pawns for the exchange, and black's dark squares are safe. Black's king will just walk over to g8, and actually black will stand pretty reasonably okay. So Gary does not want material. He wants more pieces attacking. He plays the move knight to c3. Uh-oh, this knight's coming here. And if you push the pawn to keep the knight out of that square, then the knight might come here and go after your new backward pawn weakness. Okay, black played f6, trying, I think, to get the king to f7 and castle by hand. The rook would move over and the king would walk back. But then c5, a square clearance idea. Now the bishop's going to get access to c4 in a lot of variations when the king walks. Okay, the knight ran back to f7, but then pawn takes pawn, attacking the bishop. Pawn takes pawn. We had queen to e3, guarding the bishop in a strange way. But after takes and takes, of course, black still can't castle. And if black's king walks, well, Gary will chop up that black king with bishop to c4. So instead, black tried bishop to f8. But then we had queen check. The king went to f7. Now if you give check, at least the king has access to g7. That was black's big idea. So we had knight to d5. The bishop came to e6. Knight f4, hitting the bishop. Queen e7, and guess what? It's all over in one more move. because this clever little move, just rook back to e1, the soft touch of Garry Kasparov, and uh-oh, there's a big problem. We're already threatening this bishop twice, and whenever we move this bishop, the rook will make a discovered attack. That'll be 3, and in a lot of variations, this queen can actually be targeted as well. In fact, the computer says the best try is bishop to h6. But then bishop to c4, and uh-oh, the entire world is aiming at this bishop. And I think that black is going to lose material no matter what he does. If you're gonna be an Evans Gambit player, or really any kind of player, you have to attack super quickly before your opponent gets a chance to organize development. You might be down a pawn for a while, but as long as you're attacking, you're gonna have some compensation.